does it have to do with being 60? Well, hang out and you'll find out.
Everybody lies and everybody tries. Everybody likes to wear a disguise. Everybody dies and everybody lies sometime.
Well, hello all you 60-somethings. How are you? What's going on? How is 60 treating you? Pretty well? All right, today we're going to talk about Pine-Sol. But I want to make a note real quick. The other day I was at a Trader Joe's shopping store, a grocery store. It's a little grocery store here in Southern California. They have Trader Joe's all over the place. Maybe not in your town, but they have them everywhere. Looking at some chips, and this young woman in her 20s was standing next to me, and she had a Metallica t-shirt on. Metallica. When Metallica was formed, I don't think she was even born. So I just said, hey, cool shirt, cool band. She's like, oh, Metallica, my favorite. And we went on and on and on. And I found out she's never seen Metallica. And someone turned her on to that. And so we're not going to talk about bands and t-shirts right now. I'll save that for another episode. But it made me smile thinking that people like bands who weren't even born yet when these bands came out and were popular. Anyway, so let's today talk about Pine-Sol. Yeah, I said Pine-Sol. What is it? Do you know what Pine-Sol is? Well, go Google it. I can wait for you. Or put me on pause. Pine-Sol. How does it play in my 60-something memory? Well, here's how it plays. See, when I was young, oh, by the way, if you hear some noise in the background, that's just the heat coming out. And it has relevance to what we're doing today because I'm going to talk about a furnace in a house built in 1910. That's right, 1910. So if you hear the noise, just deal with it. You'll be fine. It goes on and off. It's kind of like a furnace. So Pine-Sol, it's a cleaner. You see, when I was growing up, back outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, living with my family, from about 1972 to about 1988, when I was younger, I would clean our house on my hands and knees with a bucket of hot water and Pine-Sol. It's a cleaner. You can find it at the stores. I think it's still around. But the significance is this. See, if my mother had a bad night, she was a nurse, she would go off to work and she'd come home, and if she smelled the house cleaned with Pine-Sol, it would make her happy. Also, if we had a little bit of an argument, which we didn't do much, that was more up to my other members of the family, I would again clean the house with Pine-Sol. And I actually grew to like the smell and the feeling that it's a clean house. Now, this house had 3 floors, built in 1910, and my parents kind of renovated over the next, 50 or so years that they lived there. And it became a nicer place. New floors, new windows, and everything. One thing I should tell you is kind of funny. When we moved in, we didn't have curtains on the window. And this is a 3-story house with a basement, which I'm going to talk about too, and no curtains on the windows. 13 rooms, 1 bathroom, and we'll talk about that too. So what my mother did was put newspaper, that printed thing they used to go and get delivered or go pick up somewhere at a newsstand. She would take newspaper and put it on all the windows so no one could see in. Newspaper. So I became known as the kid who had newspaper on the windows, and our family was the house that had newspaper on the windows. But luckily, my mother knew how to sew, so a short time after that, she took bed sheets, cool looking bed sheets, and made curtains out of them. So anyway, if you ever hear about somebody putting newspaper on the windows for privacy, that might have been our house. As I said, with my bucket of hot water and a half a cup of Pine-Sol and a rag. You see, the rags were made from old towels. You could take an old towel and rip it up, maybe get 10 good rags out of it, because we didn't use sponges, we used rags, and it would rip it apart and have some threads on it. But so there I was on my hands and knees with the hot, soapy Pine-Sol water, cleaning all the floors. 3 stories, 15 rooms, 1 bathroom. And I got a great satisfaction out of that. Now, how did we heat the hot water up? Well, back on the East Coast, back in Philadelphia, and you might not know about this if you don't have a furnace or a basement, an unfinished basement, you might not know about it. So let me enlighten you, tell you about a furnace. And by the way, my mother had told me stories about the Iceman. Yeah, they didn't have a refrigerator. In South Philadelphia, an Iceman would come around and put ice in this cabinet or something so they could use it to keep food cold for most of the day. And she told me about the gas lamp lighters that would go around like gas lamps at night. Anyway, so the house built in 1910. We moved in around 1972. And in the basement, it's called an unfinished basement. Basically, you go downstairs. Now, it's the kind of basement where there's just concrete on the floor and concrete on the walls and like these little bit of windows that you could kind of hardly see out or hardly see in. Kind of reminds you of like a serial killer that is where they would keep their victims and torture them and bury them. But it was kind of like that. It could be spooky too at times. But anyway, so an unfinished basement had a large furnace. This is a rectangle thing, probably about 6 feet long, maybe about 3 feet wide and about 4 feet high. And I didn't know what was inside of it. All I know is you had these two switches, like a light switch. You flip it on and the furnace would go on. And my guess is, from what I understand what a furnace does, there's a fire inside. And then it would heat up the hot water. And part of the furnace, there's a silver tank. I don't know what it was made of. It wasn't steel, but something, maybe concrete or something. About 2 feet high. And it's like kind of oblong looking. And that's where the hot water would go. And you could put your hand on it. You could scald your hand. Then you would know the water was hot. And then the hot water would go up through the spigots. Yes, it did have running water in there, and through the house. And then it would also heat the radiators for heat. The radiators, these like metal, steel kind of things that are room kind of tubular. You can look them up too. They would heat the room. They generate heat. Anyway, so the hot water was made by the furnace. You may be thinking, okay, now, if you live in a place where they have gas, you just have like a hot water gas tank or electric, whatever. No, we had an oil tank. Yes, an oil tank. Let me tell you what that is. So across the basement, on the side of the wall, near one of the windows, the small windows, was a large oil tank. It's, again, about maybe 6 feet, 6 feet one way, maybe about 4 feet another way, and it kind of had a round top, round bottom. And then there was a little gauge. It was like a little stick, a little white felt piece on it that would be at the top for full. And then when it was drained, it would go down and down and down. And then it had a tube that would go outside of the basement. And the tube was kind of like filling up your gas tank. For example, the tube would go out the wall, and a oil person, or back in the day, it was an oil man, would come around a large oil tanker kind of truck, not that big, and park and have this huge hose, drag it over the fence through the yard, hook it up to your tube that puts it in like filling up a gas tank, and fill up your oil tank. And it had about 200 gallons. Yeah, 200 gallons. And what you would never do is let it get all the way down to the bottom, because the sludge on the bottom of the tank would ruin your furnace. So you don't want to do that. So the oil man would come out and fill it up when it got low. We could be on a monthly program, or in the wintertime, it'd be a weekly program, and you can go through a lot of oil. And it got really expensive to heat a 15-room house with 3 floors and just through radiator. So it could be very expensive in the wintertime, but we made it through. So down in the basement, unfinished basement. Now, some people I knew had finished basements, so they had more modern houses. A finished basement, you go down, maybe there's carpet on the floor, maybe a pool table, ping pong table, maybe a little bar, maybe a TV, there's paneling on the wall, but ours was unfinished. Oh, and speaking of a pool table, my father bought a pool table and put it in the dining room. So the dining room became like a dining room bar. He got a little bar, it's maybe about, 5 feet wide, about 5 feet high. It held about 2 chairs, and you could sit the chairs in front, and he'd stand behind it with his Heineken and his Crown Royal. Crown Royal was his favorite alcoholic whiskey, and he would have friends over and play pool. The thing is, when you put a pool table, 4x8 pool table, in a dining room, you're not going to be able to get great shots from every angle. So besides the usual pool cues, you would have a mini pool cue, maybe about 3 feet high. So when you got against the wall or a place you couldn't use your full stick, you would just take a little pool cue and use it. But it became the center for my dad's social life. Men would come over from work and play pool, and they would smoke and drink. Yeah, my dad smoked and he drank. And then I kind of got in the same kind of mode. Like, I learned how to play pool, had people over, I started smoking. I didn't really drink that much. That was left to other family members, not my mother, not myself, but other family members, which I won't mention here. Oh, and one of the other joys of an unfinished basement was it flooded. Yeah, so if it rained, the rain would come in, seep through the ground, come through the walls, and cover the entire floor. Could be 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 2 inches. And remember newspapers on the windows? Well, you would take the newspapers and put it on the floor to stop up all the water. It'd probably take a couple of days to air it out, especially in the wintertime. It was even worse if it rained. So if you have an unfinished basement and it's not waterproof, you have to deal with that. There was a drain on the floor where the water went out, but it would still sit there for days and days and days. You have to kind of just deal with it. Also, it was a good place for our dog to go to the bathroom. We put little newspapers again down there, and we called it the let's see, I don't want to curse, the poop paper. The poop paper place for Sam, the dog. He would go down there. There's a workbench down there that I use for I learned how to use a jigsaw and a drill, and I built some things here and there. So, and then eventually my parents put a bathroom downstairs. They could go through the sewage system. They put a toilet and a stand-up shower. And you could probably use it maybe 8 months out of the year without any issues. However, those months when it got cold, you'd run down there, run in the shower, get it real quick, and run out of it and run upstairs. So we used it all year long. But I mean, hey, come on. One bathroom upstairs for a family of 5, that was kind of tough. So the other bathroom was a relief. So anyway, so that's our unfinished basement. Oh, and we did get a washer dryer, but you'd had to put up on a pallet because see, if it rained, the water could affect the electrical system. So a pallet is something you have that grocery stores use to move large amounts of grocery boxes. Sometimes you'll see them stacked up in a store. You have this wooden pallets, like 4x4 of these slats of wood, and you stack up your grocery boxes on top of them, and they move them around. Sometimes they would just throw them out back of a grocery store. They didn't want them, or sometimes you would borrow them indefinitely. So, all you other 60-somethings, what memories do you have? What triggers your memory? The reason I bought a Pine Sol, which I didn't tell you in the beginning, I was in a post office and it smelled clean, like some kind of cleaning liquid. And I said to the woman behind the counter, "It smells clean in here." She said, "That's a good thing." I say, "You know what it reminds me of? Pine Sol." And she goes, "Pine Sol. Oh, I love Pine Sol." And I thought about my mom. I thought about growing up. And I thought about all those memories I had about Pine Sol and the house and my mother and the unfinished basement and everything else that went along with growing up in the 70s. So anyway, until next time, keep rocking. Be happy you're 60-something. 6 decades. That's a lot of living. That's a lot of life. Could have been hard. Could have been easy. Probably a mixture of everything is my guess. But just be glad we're still here. Healthy, happy, 60-something. See you next time.